The Spin-off Podcast Network.
Are you making the most of your KiwiSaver investment? Generate is an award-winning KiwiSaver provider with a track record of strong long-term performance. Making a smart decision now could add tens of thousands of dollars by the time you reach retirement. Book a no-obligation chat with a Generate KiwiSaver advisor today at generatekiwisaver.co.nz/get-advice. A copy of the product disclosure statement is available at generatekiwisaver.co.nz. The issuer of the scheme is Generate Investment Management Limited, and of course, past performance does not guarantee future returns.
I'm Toby Manhire, and this is Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, a podcast in 6 parts.
Doesn't give my opponents much time to run up to an election, does it?
This nation is at risk.
What do you think you're up to now, you perverted little liar?
I could smell the uranium on it as you lean towards it.
Most radical overhaul in the history of New Zealand's administration.
Juggernaut, the story of the Fourth Labour Government, made with the support of New Zealand On Air. Listen now on the Spin-off or wherever you get your podcasts. Kia ora tātou, this is Toby Manhire. We're taking a little break over the summer, having a little sleep. We thought we'd re-up some of our favourite episodes from the year 2020 this week. An emergency Toddcast, which we recorded in a fit after the resignation of Todd Muller, who spent 53 days before he resigned. And we gathered together at Spin-off Towers to try and work out what came next. Thanks to Flick and to Spin-off members for keeping Gone By Lunchtime on the road. This is the Spin-off Podcasting Corporation with an emergency edition of Gone By Lunchtime. Kia ora tātou, I'm Toby Manhire, that's Annabelle Lee Mather, that there's Ben Thomas, and we're all in shock. We're all in shock. We're all white fence posts, glaring at the morning news, which is that 53 days after he rolled Simon Bridges as leader, and with 67 days to go until the election on September 19, Todd Muller, and only seconds after we've learned to pronounce his name correctly, Todd Muller has resigned as leader of the National Party, as leader of the opposition, and a statement arrived at 7:33 a.m. this morning, as we were all on our exercycles. And there it was. We weren't expecting that, were we, Annabelle?
We most certainly were not. It's unprecedented.
Not only is it unprecedented, it hasn't happened before, Ben.
Unlike you guys, I'm not in shock. I'm just getting going.
You lie. You're in shock.
This is my 4th media appearance of the day. You're talking about Todd Muller. I was woken up by my phone, which was a TVNZ producer saying, "Would you like to come on the show?" And I was like, "Ah." And then they're like, to discuss the Muller resignation. I was like, "Ah." So, now I'm a seasoned pro. Now I've got my thoughts in order. This is about my 8th cup of coffee. I've had, I'm eating chickpeas.
Yeah. Well, maybe I was wrong in saying you don't look like you're in shock. You look like you are probably your eyes are about to pop clean out of your face.
Yeah. Well, I think the first media thing I did, commentating on Muller was Morning Report, and I listened back to it for, quality assurance purposes, and I was like, oh, fuck, I sound like Muller must feel. Right. You generally want a bit more time to have a shower, get ready.
He was to be giving. I was actually going to go and do some proper reporting today and go along to his speech that he was delivering at 1 p.m. to a business audience in Auckland. This was to be a speech about infrastructure. It was to be a chance. It was sort of the second time round. He gave that speech at the rugby club a while ago, but this was a chance to kind of get on the front foot again, after falling badly behind, because what did we have? We had he had a range of setbacks and a range of things where people have compared him to David Shearer. You could sort of hear the brain whirring away in the background. It was a difficult time for him, but there was something that was dimensionally different to the scandal around the leaking of private health information, which we learned, I think it was on July the 7th or something, that Michelle Bogue, former national president and, proper shady operator of the party, had leaked information to Hamish Walker, the Clutha Southland MP, about the private details of individuals, New Zealand citizens who were in quarantine with COVID-19. The media had not reported those. However, an inquiry was called, Michael Heron QC, and then they fessed. Hamish Walker had fed the information. It became a chaos of sorts that Michael Woodhouse, the health spokesman for National, had to admit that he too had received this information. Todd Muller was caught in a lie, by some accounts. You can debate the nuances of it, but essentially what happened, Annabelle, was that the TVNZ reporter asked him repeatedly whether or not Michael Woodhouse had received such information from Michelle Bogue. Muller said no. He said the word no. He tried to kind of dance around it for a bit. It was difficult for him. I don't think that in any way he was kind of, he just sort of wasn't very good at doing that political dance. And then whatever. The statement this morning said that there were health issues, which we of course can't dismiss. That's awful. It's been an awful 53 days for him. Was that whole scandal, that leaking scandal, did that just bring home? Must have been incredibly stressful. Just how fucking hard that job is.
Well, I think he's only been in Parliament since 2014, right? So I think he vastly underestimated how difficult the role is of leader. And I don't think we should underestimate when they reference, health concerns in his press release, how big a part of that it would have played in his decision. But frankly, to resign now in the middle of a scandal that hasn't been resolved, when an inquiry is underway into the actions of his team and himself, is a really poor thing to do for his party.
And we can't rule out, can we, Ben, that there is more to come? I mean, it isn't, as Annabelle rightly says, the line has not been drawn under it. We don't know yet what Heron might find if he looks under some other rocks.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we've got two interpretations of Muller's statement. The first is that, there is more to come, that there are bodies, falling from the ceiling, that there are, corpses rising from the swamp, and that he's trying to get in front of that and just get out cleanly. It's possible. There was nothing last week that I thought was a resignation-worthy offence by any stretch. He didn't lie to TVNZ. He certainly wasn't forthcoming with the truth. He was asked, did Michael Woodhouse receive the information that Hamish Walker leaked? Woodhouse had assured him that it was different information. Now, Muller could have probably been a bit more curious and said, how do you know it's different information? And then Woodhouse would have said, I talked to Bogue on the weekend and assured her that I wasn't the leak. And she said, I know you're not the leak because it's different information. Then you might be curious as to why Michelle Bogue knew that it was different information if she wasn't involved in the leak. So, I mean, certainly a bit of naivety on display there. But, Michael Woodhouse receiving leaked information and not using it is not actually the crime of the century. Politicians get leaks all the time. They've got to make a judgment as to whether they use it or not. Woodhouse, I think, was totally justified in thinking that if he closed off that door to Bogue, that she would not then go and retail it to some no-name junior backbencher in trouble in Southland.
I think that's total bullshit. I think, that it's deeply disingenuous to say that Muller didn't purposely try to mislead the media when he was being questioned about how much, whether or not Todd Woodhouse had received the same information. It was essentially the same information. It was just a different list of names because the case, who's got COVID and who doesn't is changing all the time. Secondly, in terms of what Michael Woodhouse has done, it's incredibly serious. This is someone who wants to be the Minister of Health. The privacy of patients is absolutely sacrosanct, and if he was genuine and honourable, he would have told the Ministry of Health that sort of information was being circulated at the very least.
It kind of comes down, if nothing else, to just not being good enough at doing politics, isn't it? That's the kind of tragedy of it. I was flicking through my phone earlier and I had a text from someone who was in the Simon Bridges team after that debacle of a day, the first sitting day when the cameras were allowed up and down the caucus corridor and Paul Goldsmith was identified as Ngāti Pro, and there were various other kind of thick of it moments. And the text from this person said, it's obviously not as easy as they thought it would be. And it is just hard, you know? And I remember also watching that first interview that Todd Muller gave with Jack Tame on Q&A, and he had the difficulty of a slight lag in the feed from Wellington, but he was being asked about some sort of fairly straightforward fiscal things, and you could just see that thing, which did remind one of David Shearer of the different advisors and experts and pundits and friends and colleagues in the air saying, you've got to remember to do this, you've got to remember to keep your chin up, you've got to remember to get on the front foot, you've got to remember to say this, not to say that. And it just, some of us aren't cut out for it. You know, most of us aren't cut out for it.
Somewhere in New Zealand right now, Simon Bridges is sitting on a Rocky Mountain outcrop, stroking a yak with a MAGA cap on, screaming the words of Babylon into the wind, I reckon.
Underneath a waterfall, frolicking with a baby yak.
Yeah.
Boom sounds coming out of his C64 keyboard.
I reckon he's got one of those little kind of baby's bottles he's feeding the yak.
Yeah.
Probably got a little bit of bourbon in there.
Yeah.
And just,
totally.
It's just a scene.
Yeah, this is a bit of a diversion from the National Party, contretemps, but I actually just want to go back to the leaking thing, because I think it is, I think it's just worth discussing, because sometimes these things get flattened in the sort of media discourse. As you guys know in the media, and as I know from politics in the media, you know, leaks are the lifeblood of democracy. There's zero problem with getting a leak from somebody, and you don't usually get leaks from well-motivated, well-meaning people. You don't, right? People leak in order to get their own back on people, or in very rare instances where they actually see something that they feel could be improved in sort of the public sphere. Sometimes that information will be of the public interest. And if you're an MP, you can use it to hold the government to account if you're in the opposition. A lot of the time, it'll be sort of marginal, and the vast bulk of the time, the tips that you get are just cranks or, you know, stuff that you shouldn't be seeing and that is of no value to you, as was the case with the Bogue links. You know, I saw some people saying, he should have immediately reported this to the Ministry of Health. Well, I mean, no journalist would do that with their sources. They would say, Radio New Zealand did not do that with their sources. No, but
he's the wannabe Minister of Health.
No, he's a politician, and his job is to hold the government to account. And you have similar kind of practices with sources as a politician that you do with the media. There's no absolute source protection in media. If somebody came to you and said, I murdered somebody, but keep it off the record, you wouldn't do that, right? You call the police. Same with Michael Woodhouse. But then there's a lot of grey areas in between where you say, well, I don't want this information. It would be totally inappropriate. I can't use it. But I know that you're hooked into this information flow, and I would like to get anything that is germane to holding the government to account anywhere they have fucked up. And so you don't turn in your sources. You know, I think it's very naive of people who thought that Michael Woodhouse himself should have whistleblown on Michelle Bogue. The fault was Michelle Bogue betrayed her professional confidences, right? Very clearly and egregiously. Now, we rely on people to do that in order to get leaks sometimes. You can't, I mean,
there's conflicts and there's conflicts, right? And Michelle Boke herself has, I thought it was quite an interesting release, the last one that she put out when she resigned, where she basically, what were the words? Can you remember, Bells? It was basically that she realised
that she had formed a toxic relationship with politics. And so I think it was really candid, actually, and insightful, and probably very
she
true.
had lost. She had.
I think it was like one of those Louis C.K. Me Too kind of apologies, where you immediately shoehorn your own failings and your own misconduct and public opprobrium into a personal redemption arc narrative.
Maybe,
and it only becomes relevant as far as your own moral
unhealthy relationship.
I agree that the apology was absolutely lackluster, but I think there is truth in what she said about developing a toxic relationship with tribal New Zealand politics.
And for a relatively young first-term MP like Hamish Walker, who hasn't been through all of those different episodes of politics over time, he got presumably overexcited. Why did he leak? Who knows? Well, it turns out to try and vindicate his ostensibly racist claims, so let's not defend him too hard. But, basically... And
the defence was, look at the funny names on this list.
It seems that way.
Ben, I just want to go back to what you said before. I totally disagree that the privileged journalists offer their sources in terms of keeping their names confidential is the same of that as politicians. This was a public interest issue in that COVID is the single biggest threat to our country. And so I absolutely think he had a responsibility at the very least to report it. But also, it wasn't like he'd asked her for that information, so he owed her no favours. There'd been no agreement. And moreover, I think that if it was such meaningless information and not a big deal, why go and delete it once the inquiry's been announced? That's essentially the destruction of evidence.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see. Presumably those emails haven't been deleted from Michelle Bogue's outbox, nor, if there were any replies, which we're told there aren't, we'd see them. I'll tell you one thing that hasn't come up very much in this, which is, in terms of the politics of it, someone who's played the politics extremely well is Chris Hipkins and the government, who called in quite quick time, called for a pretty high-level inquiry into this leak, which at the time struck many of us as, gosh, that's kind of interesting because it's the kind of thing you might just want to, given it ostensibly is kind of embarrassing for the government and for health officials, maybe you'd be preferring just to move on rather quickly. So whether or not they had an inkling, a hunch, a tip, but certainly it ended up with a huge moral high ground, and it was devastating, as we've seen. And presumably we can join the dots to where we are today. And where we are today is facing the very real prospect of having within the space of 8 weeks or so, 3 different National Party leaders, which is...
It's so Labour 2013 was
so
around
except as is typical, Labour innovate and National manage, and National we'll take the idea of musical chairs with leaders, but we'll do it faster, we'll do it more efficiently.
and of course, in terms of
three leaders in 3 years, we can beat that.
The deja vu of it. Of course, if yes, we're very close to an election, but let's not forget Jacinda Ardern came into power, into the leadership 7 weeks. We know it's the toughest job in politics, blah, blah, blah. So obviously the secret is not to do it for very fucking long at all before becoming Prime Minister. But the difference, of course, is that this is a sort of different level of disaster. Also, the heir apparent, if there is one, the deputy
was obvious.
Was part. No, it was. But this time round, the deputy was part of the campaign to roll the person beforehand. So do you think, is Nikki Kaye, I should say where we are in terms of the history of time in the world, it's now 10:30 on Tuesday. So this morning,
I'm just gearing up for the afternoon.
Ben is gearing up for the afternoon in a very real sense. The National Party caucus met this morning via teleconference, And no doubt Gerry was told many times, "You're on mute, Gerry. You're on mute." We can only assume that. And then this evening, they are all descending like a flock of seagulls upon the beehive in Wellington, or at least in Parliament in Wellington, where they will have an emergency caucus meeting. And one assumes have a vote. I mean, I think it's been suggested that they want to get a new leader within 24 hours, so they probably won't piss around, and I expect they'll have a vote. And who will they choose, Annabelle? Tell us exclusively who is going to emerge as the new leader of the National Party.
Well, I'm guessing it won't be Michael Woodhouse for a start. I don't know, and I have to. I mean, no one obvious springs to mind, do they? And I don't get the impression that Nikki Kaye particularly wants to be leader, and I'm not sure that she would be the right fit for that role. But it's a little bit curious to me that, I mean, obviously there's a lot of speculation about Judith, but we know about the ABCs. But they may have no choice but to vote her. I guess the question will be whether or not she wants to. I do question why you would have the vote in such a short amount of time before people are really able to do some soul searching and perhaps have some health checks before they apply for that position.
Just to check whether they are cake. Oh, there you go. We're relevant in youth culture. Anyway, yeah, also Nikki Kaye is the interim leader appointed over the teleconference. I would offer odds of about 50,000 to 1 that Nikki will be let anywhere near the leadership after the last 8 weeks.
Really? Interesting.
I feel that perhaps she should get another few years on her belt in senior positions.
Do you think she'll get rolled as deputy, Ben?
I think it depends who the leader is. I think there's 2 clear candidates for leader. The first is Simon Bridges.
Oh, of course.
The prodigal son.
SB.
The capital gains yaks.
Yeah.
We all love a redemption story. And Simon Bridges was cast out into the wilderness. He's wandered for 1,000 years, but with yaks, so it's been fine. He has, I think, certainly with the media, as a result of, using social media for its proper purpose, which is to look hot and make your ex jealous. He's been living his best life online. That has, I think, softened his
image.
Edit this thing out. It softened his image. Probably removed some of the harder edges. A bit of as a cliche, the real Simon Bridges coming through. Certainly, it seemed a bit more likable on social media. And he might point to that. He would point to the fact that they were on 45% in January. That before COVID, they were knife edge to win the election with the help of ACT. He would point to the fact that he has a machine essentially that could go right back in. They can rehire Rachel Morden as the press secretary. They can rehire Jamie Gray as the chief of staff. They can
rehire Paula Bennett as the deputy leader.
And it's like, it was a 2-month, we've awoken from a strange dream and now we're back into the campaign. So that would be his argument. I mean, and don't undersell it.
And he is reputed to have lost by 1 or 2 votes.
That's right. It certainly wasn't a landslide. Muller-mania came much later in the piece. And with Judith Collins, for instance, her pitch is just that she is the best performing National MP in opposition. She was one of the best performing ministers over a very long period in the Key government. She has a very high profile. She has considerable, disfavourable ratings, but probably not as bad as Bridges. And she's very appealing to parts of the National Party base.
Do you think Simon will want it though? Because obviously he wants it, but do you think he'll want it right now, or do you think that he'll be perhaps considering that it might be better to let National get the hiding that it's probably going to get in the election and then come back, rise like a phoenix from the ashes and take it over then with a new 3-year cycle to start? Or do you reckon he'll be keen to jump back in?
With Bridges, you would have a sense of slightly interrupted continuity. With Collins, you would again have the sort of Hail Mary, roll the dice, shortly before the election. I think Bridges would probably be the person who is keenest to do it. I think in terms of, letting National, take the L in the election and then jumping in. I think that seems to be what Judith Collins has in mind. She was not prominent during the challenge to Bridges, and was very sort of careful to say that she was just voting. So I personally don't think that this would be the time that she would choose. I think Bridges, he would say rightly, has a bit of a sense of aggrievement that he was dumped.
Yeah, and he's been open. I mean, he's been very open. He actually said that to us when we did that piece on the big yak story. He sort of said he still had things to do. He pretty implied pretty clearly he was aggrieved still, and that he was still ambitious, So I think he'd want it. I don't know if I think that's the idea that you can just say we had this kind of crazy bender with Todd Muller and then we're back to normal. I don't know if it's quite as simple
like
as
a one-night stand.
There are a lot of people who've been moved around both in staff and also in terms of the shadow cabinet, for want of a better word. So, Collins, I feel like...
Well, actually, that's an interesting point you raise in terms of the staffing. National has a lot of parliamentary funding because it's the biggest party in Parliament. But look, they will have burned through a lot of cash with payouts to former staffers, hiring new staffers. They'll have payouts to the old staffers if the new leadership doesn't want to take them. That's going to have some impact on their ability to recruit for the election. These are sorts of things that you don't hear about much in terms of media coverage in the public face. But this will present problems in terms of signing people up.
And billboards are printed, ads will have been made. They're not going to be fundraising very cheerfully at the moment. I mean, it really is a shitty state that they find themselves in.
I mean, the other thing is, look, I think my sense is that Muller is a pretty good and decent person.
Yeah.
But, I think the issue has been, first of all, some lapses in judgment, and second of all, an ability to handle the pressure. And you see that mostly in the timing of this, which is yesterday, the Serious Fraud Office announced that it was investigating the Labour Party. So Jacinda Ardern's party is now being investigated by the Serious Fraud Office. And, that was in the news for about an hour until we all went to sleep. And then National blow it out of the water with Muller's resignation.
Yeah, they did it. You remember the day when there was the young man who decided to go to Countdown to buy some body lotion and disappeared for 40 minutes and all that sort of stuff. And it was this incredible sign of more breach in terms of the border provisions, and there was no National Party person who was put up on Checkpoint or on ZB to speak about it because they were busy dealing with. So it's again, that's this kind of self-destructive thing in terms of how you do opposition, but just don't do so much. Whereas Jacinda Ardern's been on holiday for a week. That's the way to do it. Stand back.
Now, in terms of staffing, the benefits that Bridges and Collins both have in terms of staffing is that they have loyalists. Bridges has loyalists some of whom are still there, some of whom have only been out of the jobs for about a month, and who could slot back in very easily. Collins has her own cadre of people. She was a very assiduous office builder when she was a minister. She's got a lot of people who would basically really flock back to create a Judith Collins office. The question with Collins would be that the National Party has shown that it can't be trusted to fall in unified behind a new leader. The Walker Contra-temp was a good example of that. Woodhouse not fully disclosing to Muller was another example. I understand that various MPs were going off and doing media appearances without getting permission from the leader, and if they're not going to be rational and present a united front for a campaign, you probably wouldn't put in somebody who's very polarising in caucus, which would be Collins.
But if not now, when? I mean, you say Hail Mary, and, the Jacinda Ardern thing was a Hail Mary. Judith Collins has proved herself to be an extremely effective politician over a long time, and you can't say that she is – I mean, she built a reputation as being someone who was not necessarily the most loyal, but lately she's been really loyal, both to Bridges and to Muller. Her book was much less of a pitch for the leadership than was expected by many. But the last chapter in that book is very much laying out a kind of manifesto for leadership. What's that? Ben's showing me a message. Do you want to read that out? Because I don't know whether it's...
This is a tweet from Jason Walls. The word from the Herald, he's quoting an Audrey Young column, the words mental health have not been used, but Muller has had a breakdown to the extent that he was unable to even make the emergency teleconference caucus call this morning to tender his resignation.
Oh, well, that's really sad news.
Let's take back all our jokes.
It is. We talked in the last podcast a bit about the toll that politics can take, and about the extent to which we need to sometimes be very careful about not taking too lightly the genuine impact it can have on people involved in it. So we send all our best to Todd Muller and family on that front. I think Collins has a shot. Honestly, I think if she can win over the caucus by saying, "Give me one shot," much like in the musical Hamilton. If anyone has seen that, there is that song called "One Shot," which sounds a bit like that Eminem song. But anyway, let's not get into that. I think it's whatever it is, 9 weeks to the election. If it doesn't work out, it can't get worse, right? Like that would be the argument.
Like when you wake up from a dream, but then you're still dreaming, and then you wake up again.
Yeah, it's a room inside a room inside a room. So for example, if you were, because there are other people, right? There's like someone else that has shown leadership ambitions is Mark Mitchell. Who if you were just wait. If you were Mark Mitchell, I think you might think not now, but I wouldn't mind Judith to take it from here, and then if you had ambitions further down the line, that is.
Look, I think that's reasonable, and that might be their thinking. I think that the first time that you, as a political party, you probably get one opportunity to introduce somebody that no one in the public has ever heard of, and introduce this completely anonymous stranger and say, this is our next prime minister. He's got the goods. And then after he flames out in 2 months, you really lose the license to produce another completely unknown person who may or may not be a member of parliament, who knows, and say, this time we're serious. It's Mark Mitchell.
Other outside chances would be like a proper caretaker, like Gerry Brownlee. Gerry's going to do it. He's just going to hold the line. He's going to do the furniture saving job. That wasn't meant to be a carpentry joke. I meant saving the furniture. The Mike Moore thing. I don't know. It's a tricky one, right? It's a very tricky one. I think you dismiss Nikki Kaye too quickly, Ben. I think there is an opportunity that they say, well, this is the continuity candidate.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
I agree with Ben.
Okay.
I don't think.
Well, then you think Simon too? You're in the Yak team. Yak.
I think. I mean, I don't know if, although I think he has done a good job of reinventing himself on social media and everyone's cheering him on. I don't know if New Zealand has quite forgotten why they got ho-ha with Simon in the first place. But I think, of everyone, it seems Simon and Judith would have to be the front runners.
Simon Bridges was on 5% preferred Prime Minister in his last poll as leader. That's...
Oh, he had very significant weaknesses. He's still got them.
But he's got a baby yak, and that is a game changer.
I mean, if the yak is deputy leader, he's in with a shot.
The billboards, what if the billboards are just the yak with whoever the local candidate is?
I love that.
Make it the yak.
Great
Bring
team,
national
better
yak.
economy, more yak.
Yak to the future.
Yak to the future. Yakking New Zealand. Yeah.
I mean, look, as I think...
Yak national.
I think I said the same during the Todd Muller challenge, which is that I think Judith Collins would be the best candidate to lead National into the election.
We know you love Auntie Judith. That's cool. We hear you.
She's just without question the strongest performer that they have. That's basically a political fact. Whether the National Party will, and as you said earlier, at some point they have to make her leader. Just like with David Cunliffe before.
Here's the most compelling case for Judith Collins. Who in the National Party would put a chill up the spine of Labour the most? Who would they most be scared of.
Absolutely, Judith. And Judith Collins is the only person in the National Caucus who could foot it one-on-one with Jacinda Ardern in a presidential-style campaign in the debates. She still has baggage in caucus, and who knows which way they'll go. If they're going for, a known quantity, but then again, Bridges might say, well, we were here 2 months ago, a known quantity versus rolling the dice. You rolled the dice and look what happened. If National have given up and decided that, look, we're not going to win, we need to just maintain the base, Bridges might be able to argue that he's the guy to do it. I mean, Judith Collins could certainly do it. But yeah.
Well, there we are.
It'll be interesting to see.
Bells, anything to add to that?
I think Ben's right in terms of a matchup with Jacinda Ardern that looks fair and not lopsided, and can challenge her. Then you'd have to say Judith.
It's the only name that would make the Labour campaign team go, okay, all right, we're going to have to have another think about how we go about this, and that alone is enough to maybe get her over the line.
Yeah, we'll see. There's been huge antipathy with it and reticence in the National Caucus to recognise that Judith Collins would be a good performer.
She hasn't come close to having the numbers. And let's bear one more thing in mind, which no doubt played into Muller's successful election as leader, which is that for a lot of the people making the decision, it's not necessarily how National Party will be at the election in 2023 or whenever. It's about whether or not the result this time is good enough to allow them to A, retain their constituency seat, or B, get enough of the party vote so that their place on the list is there. So it's not quite a matter of sitting down and going, who do we think is a kind of high risk strategy is not necessarily one that enough of them will be keen on.
No, that's right. Who knows whether this refocuses their minds. I mean, the only thing we know for sure is that it's not going to be it has to be a leader they can use right out of the box. One thing that Simon Bridges has done is, he's proved that he's, in fighting for his job, he proved he was a lot tougher than any of us sort of really knew. And, and you see it now, he's a guy who's obviously got some resiliency. Judith Collins has tremendous resilience. And it can't, you can't take a punt on somebody that you haven't seen front Q&A, that you haven't seen front stand-ups with 30 members of the gallery before. So it has to be Collins or Bridges.
Or Nikki Kaye. Thanks everyone for entertaining us today. Thank you very much, Tina Tiller. We love you. We love everyone listening to this podcast.
Oh, we're not talking about the other stuff.
What other stuff?
The other stuff you said we were going to talk about.
We keep meaning to talk about the bad boys of Brexit.
I just feel like this overwhelms everything else, doesn't it? Do people want to hear it? Do you want to? It sort of feels like now they're just going to flick off. They're already flicked off
gone.
now.
Okay, no. Bye. See everyone.
What?
Oh, tell your friends to like and subscribe and become a spin-off member.
Oh, and Flick Electric is the sponsor of this podcast. We love them even more than we love the average listener or Tina.
The one thing the National Party caucus will be thinking about is how to keep the lights on. They should call Flick Electric.
And play jingle.
Talofa Lover. I'm Madeline Chapman, editor at The Spinoff. If you have the means, consider supporting our high-quality journalism by becoming a Spinoff member. Sign up now at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spinoff. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spinoff member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate.
The Spinoff Podcast Network.